What are we trying to do? We're trying to now make it possible for kids who aren't academically inclined, which is most of us, not just a few of us, but most of us, to learn stuff that only the academically inclined kids in my day were expected to learn. No, I didn't say academically able, I said the academically inclined. There are a lot of people who are very able to achieve academic qualities that aren't inclined to do so because they're not inclined to do the work that academics do. You have to be an academic to enjoy academic work. There are a lot of people who enjoy other kinds of works, but they don't enjoy academic work. And so if we're going to make work productive for most kids, we have to find a way to get them engaged in academic work as opposed to passively compliant and willing to do it. And that's why this conference and everything else that we do at the center is about, is how do you create engaging work? Because without engaging work, you do not produce the kind of levels of understanding and skills that we now expect in the 21st century. And it's not just for economic reasons. It's for reasons that kids, I was talking to someone this morning about it. We don't understand it. The power relationship between adults and children have changed for no other reason than the growth of the digital world. When I was in school, if kids wanted information, they either had to get it from adults that they knew, their parents, their family, their church, or their school. That's where the information came from. Now kids are getting information before the adults get it. They're getting it through easy access to electronics. And they're learning stuff before the teachers know it. And some of the stuff they learn ain't so factual, as you recall from my last night's talk, or it can be construed as misinformation. So we've got to find ways to make the work of students engaging that used to not be engaged. We didn't care whether they were engaged or not. We hope they keep their nose clean, sit down and shut up, and do all right. Our school's set up for 4 kinds of kids. Those that were academically inclined and found academic work engaging, those that were nice kids and would do something, and those that were nice kids and wouldn't do much, and those that were going to drop out. Now you've got to create engagement. Then we just harvested it. We just picked those kids who were engaged and gave them honor, and everybody else got by with compliance, minimum compliance, and did the job and kept their nose clean and graduated. We graduated a lot of kids in the old days that didn't learn much. The difference is we didn't know it. Because once you graduated from high school, there weren't many jobs you had to take that people would ever catch you if you couldn't read. When somebody says to me, are students engaged, there's about 4 kinds of questions I ask them. 3 of them are listed up here. First thing, if you're engaged, you're attentive. If I wanted to measure engagement, the first thing I'd look at are people paying attention. That's the old time on task kind of stuff. A kid's engaged. One of the indicators of engagement is attention. But attention's not enough to be engaged. You got to care about what you're attending to. That means you got to care about enough to persist with it when you have difficulty. So another thing I'd want to look at is persistence. Not only do they do the task, but if they don't succeed at it, they come back for more because they find it's so worthwhile to them that they'll stick with it. And so persistence, this is one of the reasons I don't have much for so-called walkthroughs as a way of assessing engagement. You can't measure my persistence by walking through. You can maybe infer that it's like with you sitting there right now. I like to think you're engaged, but you may be fantasizing for all I know. I don't know whether you're with me or whether you're not. But you've got to look in your eye like you're engaged, and I can say, well, these people they're paying attention. I don't know whether you're paying attention or not. I have to infer you're paying attention. But attentiveness is important, and persistence is important. That is, you stick with it over time. Another thing I know about engagement is that when people are engaged, they're willing to allocate the scarce resources over which they have control, primarily their time. If students are engaged, they persist, and they commit voluntarily their time. They do things outside of the requirement because they find it an important thing to do. The critical result of student engagement is that students learn that which it is important for them to learn because you get them engaged in the right work. But I've added to that, beyond what we normally have talked about in the past, I've added to that meaning and value. If the work is going to be engaging work, it has to have meaning and value to the student in the terms that the student understands. So what I've just listed for you, when people say, how do I measure engagement? That's the 4 things you measure. You measure attention. You measure persistence. You measure commitment. And you measure the presence of meaning and value. If the work doesn't produce those four things, then it's not engaging work. Now, engaging work isn't the only thing over which teachers have control, but it's one of the two things over which you have control. The other thing over which you have control is your relationship with the kids. There's really only two things that teachers have control over. And that is the characteristics of the work they give the kids and the relationship they have with the kids. And therefore, you can have engaging teachers, you can have engaging work. And those are the only two ways that you get kids engaged. And what you begin to find out, if you start looking at the difference between early elementary school, particularly primary school, and high school, is the relationship with the teacher in the elementary school, particularly the first kindergarten, first and second grade, is often enough to keep the kids engaged. Not always, but often. That if I love my kindergarten teacher and my kindergarten teacher tells me that I ought to love something, I believe I ought to love it and I do it. Because I love my teacher. First grade, you get that too. Second grade, you get a little less of it, but it's still there. By the third grade, some of the kids begin to suspect that that ain't all there is to it. And by the fourth grade, it's going to take more than a personable teacher with a personal relationship. And the older the kids get, the more the work takes meaning, and the less the personality of the teacher takes meaning. And therefore, working on the work becomes a more pronounced thing. It is not that it's unimportant in kindergarten. But kindergarten teachers have a backup resource that older teachers don't have, and that is their relationship with the kids. So when they design boring and terrible work, the kids will still do it because their teacher loves it. So they don't get, it's like the kid that I graduated with that couldn't read, they just don't get caught. But when you're a junior high teacher, you get caught all the time. So it's not that working on the work is unimportant in the kindergarten and is very important in the high school. That's not the case at all. Interestingly, it's much easier to work with an elementary school faculty in working on the work than it is to work with a high school faculty. Because many high school faculty don't believe that's their job. It's not my job to engage the kids. It's my job to produce lessons that they need, that I like, and their job to appreciate it. And if they don't appreciate it, that's their problem. I don't know if I saw some of you laughing. You must have experienced some of that. It's not my job to get you engaged. It's your job to be engaged. What about the children's responsibility to be engaged? One of the things that we find interesting as we go through this stuff is, we do a lot of interviewing with kids. And one day one of our staff members interviewed a student about engagement. He said, oh yes, he said, I'm a lot more engaged now than I was before my teacher started talking to me about engagement. He said, because I didn't even know I was supposed to be engaged. But now that I know that I'm supposed to be engaged and the teacher cares about me being engaged, I work real hard with her to try to make the work that she gives me more engaging. Now, that's an interesting statement. That I didn't know I was supposed to be engaged. I just thought I was just supposed to sit there. But now that I know what it is, I'm working with my teacher to make the work more engaging. Kind of a fascinating notion.